They told me to avoid room 666. I laughed the first night. Cheap superstition, a motel joke, until the building itself seemed to lean away from that corridor, and the laugh stuck in my throat like a dry cough. I checked in after midnight, fluorescent light buzzing over the reception like a trapped insect, the clerk's smile thin and tired, a key that clinked heavier than it should. The hallway smelled of old coffee and industrial cleaner, the carpet a faded map of footsteps that led, inevitably, to a red door with the numbers painted black and stubborn, 666. The number looked carved into the air itself, dark as an accusation. I told myself it was just paint. I told myself a dozen things while my heart climbed into my throat. My room was one breath from ordinary. A single bed, a lamp, a TV that hummed static, but the door never felt entirely closed. There was a draft that came from under it, not cold air, but that metallic, sharp tang that makes your tongue prick, like pennies and rust and something older. When I pushed the door all the way and looked down the narrow corridor, the bulb at the far end flickered twice, then steadied as if nothing had happened. Sound exaggerates in the night. Every pipe, every settling board becomes a language you haven't learned yet. I listened until my ears rang. The first oddity was a sound I couldn't place. Not footsteps, more like someone dragging a chair slowly across linoleum, a rasping whisper of movement that came from inside the room across from mine. I told myself it was plumbing, a loose shutter, the building breathing. Then the smell arrived, not mold, but a sweet decay that made the back of my throat raw. I know the difference between harmless rot and something that remembers old things, and this remembered a long time ago. I went to bed because refusing to sleep felt worse than the thought of whatever was in the other room. I should have kept my eyes open. Halfway through a dreamless hour, the silence in the motel multiplied into a presence, like the way a room feels when someone sits very still in the corner. I heard a fingernail on wood, soft, deliberate, searching a seam. The hair along my arms lifted. My phone was in my hand before my brain had decided I would use it. The screen was useless, a small, cold lighthouse that did not help. There was a whisper of motion at the threshold. The red door across the hall, the one with 666, had shifted a fraction. A shadow filled the crack, longer than human, and in that thin slit I thought I saw a face like a promise gone wrong, eyes small and bright, a mouth that wanted. I should have left then. Instead, I stepped closer, into the smell, into the dark, because curiosity was a smaller panic than admitting I was afraid. The door creaked wider, and something inside smiled without sound. I pressed my palm to the warped wood and felt the grain prickle like skin. The air that spilled from the gap was warmer than the corridor, wrong in a way that lodged under my ribs, and a taste that wasn't there filled my mouth, like iron and old coins. The thing inside the room shifted. The floorboard complained as if turning to listen. When the door eased open enough for a hand to slide through, I saw long fingers, black as if stained by smoke, knuckles bent like broken promises. They clung to the frame and then withdrew, leaving a smear of something dark that caught the light and did not shine. My phone showed 1% battery, an accusation. I fumbled for the charger and the lamp, anything to make light behave like a weapon. The television flickered and then tuned to a static-laced image of my own corridor, my door visible, the red one across, and for a beat, a shadow standing in my doorway that matched my outline but not my posture. I stood up so fast the chair fell and the sound ricocheted down the hall. Whoever owned that shadow shifted like a person rearranging their face. I ran to the door across the hall and rattled it. It resisted like tissue. Through the crack, I heard a voice that knew my name. It wasn't anyone's voice I recognized. It used the syllables of my childhood nicknames. It threaded compliments I had never heard spoken aloud. The mind understands familiarity before logic can intervene, so for a second I opened my mouth to answer. Old photographs flashed in the dark behind my eyes, a grandma with a crooked smile, a boy under a blanket at 3, a secret hidden in the crawlspace of my old house. The voice quoted them like prayers. When I screamed, the sound came out wrong, layered, doubled, as if recorded and played back slow. Down the hall, doors responded with tiny taps, like teeth chattering. I shuffled backwards, and the motel woke around me. Not with people, but with attention. The walls inhaled. The floral wallpaper seemed to pulse under my touch, and in the pattern I thought I could see shapes, eyes tucked in leaves that watched the way my chest rose. I tried the phone again and found one new message waiting, though I hadn't received it before. A photo of the red door taken from the inside, grainy and too close, with black letters smeared where the number should be. There was no timestamp and no sender, only the single caption, "You never left." My hands went cold. Between my scapulae, something old and patient slid a finger across my spine. I fled down the stairwell because leaving felt like the only sane thing left. By the time I reached the lobby, the clerk's desk was empty, and the sign-in log had 4 names crossed out with neat, careful strokes, my name among them, written in an ink I did not recognize. The elevator hummed. When the doors opened on the ground floor, the parking lot was there and then not. A patchwork of asphalt and fog that swallowed my car as if it had never been owned. I realized, with an animal clarity, that this place did not let people go the same way twice. It recycled exits into entrances. I ran back. The corridor had narrowed. The red door was wider than before, and when I looked through the crack, I saw not a room, but a depth that should not fit in a motel. A hallway of doors, each one painted with a different number, each one a mouth waiting to speak my mistakes. The thing inside made a small, delighted sound, like a nail on glass, and then, impossibly, the door began to close in on me, as if it had chosen to breathe my shape into itself. The door's lip brushed my cheek like a cold tongue, and the hallway inside sighed, slow and patient, as if reading a long-awaited page. I tried to wrench myself free. My fingers dug into the jam and the wood rasped under my nails. The air beyond the crack tasted of a house I had never lived in, but somehow remembered. Saucepan steam, the faint copper of old coins, a child's laughter that had been taped and replayed too many times. Each breath I took pulled another memory up from where I'd buried it. A promise I broke, a face I turned from, the exact words I whispered in the dark at age 11. The motel was fishing me with my past, and I could feel the hook cold and precise inside my ribs. There was no one to blame but myself. Panic is a bright animal that shows every flaw, the way my knees failed, the way my mouth formed questions without sound. The doors along that impossible corridor breathed in sympathy with me. Behind each number, a life waited, some trivial, some monstrous, but all cataloged, labeled patient. I understood, with a clarity that was less thought than sensation, that this place didn't steal people, it taught them to stay. It polished their worst secrets and offered them back as bait, and it learned faster than I could invent an excuse. I pushed until the muscles in my back burned and felt the wood give like skin. For a moment I thought I would fall into light, into air and parking lot and asphalt and the absurd comfort of distance. Instead, I toppled into a small room that mirrored every stage of my life, compact and wrong. My childhood bed folded into itself, the wallpaper from my first apartment with the coffee stain I never cleaned, the face of the woman I loved, printed in a dozen Polaroids with her eyes scratched out. The thing in the corner, that shadow that had smiled without sound, was close now. It did not need to move to own the space. It filled it the way rot fills a fruit, quietly from the inside. It spoke to me then, not with words, but with a pressure at the base of my skull. The memory of a lullaby slightly off-key. Faces from my past leaned in the opening of other doors, whispering their little betrayals. I tried to scream and only found the sound of my own voice, recorded and warped, coming from a radio that wasn't mine. I clawed at the air, slapped at photographs that seemed to flinch away from my fingers. The red of the door was everywhere, on the carpet, on the ceiling, smeared onto my palms like an accusation. As the room contracted, as if the walls were counting down, a thought slid into me that was not mine. Calm, efficient, delighted. It showed me what I would become if I stopped fighting. Patient, cunning, useful. I pictured a shadow waiting beyond a different door, feeling for seams, learning names. The last coherent thing I did was try to write my name on the inside of that door with the edge of a broken key, and have to leave myself a map. My hand trembled. The ink bled into the grain and the letters rearranged themselves into digits I couldn't stop reading. When the light went, something warm and deliberate brushed my ear and said my name as if it had been rehearsing it for years. It knows my name.
subscribe to Horror Story Bar.